This is the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were the first two humans to ever exist. They were the ones who committed the first sin and are the father and mother of all humanity. This story is narrated in chapter 2 of the book of Genesis. Here is the story. When God created Adam from the dust of the earth and gave him life by breathing into his nostrils, he brought all the animals he had created and showed them to Adam. Adam had the honor of naming the animals, but after all of them had been named, God felt that there was no suitable helper for Adam. So he decided to make Adam fall into a deep sleep, and from his rib he created Eve, whom Adam called woman, because she came from man. God created the Garden of Eden as their home, and in it there were all kinds of trees from which God told Adam and Eve they could eat, except for one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One day, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, the serpent, who was the most cunning of all the creatures God had made, tempted Eve to eat the fruit from this tree, and she shared it with her husband who was with her. Although they were forbidden to eat from the fruit of that tree, Adam and Eve ate, disobeying God and committing the first sin. But as God is just, he had no choice but to banish them from the garden. He told them that, because they had sinned, they would have to suffer the consequences. They would have to work hard to make the soil produce food. They would feel pain, and they would eventually die after a very difficult life. The story of Adam and Eve contains several important lessons that we can learn. Here are some of them. First lesson: obedience to divine laws. The story of Adam and Eve highlights the importance of obeying God's commandments. They were instructed not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but they chose to disobey. This teaches us the importance of following the guidance and moral principles that are established for our spiritual and emotional well-being. Second lesson: personal responsibility. Adam and Eve were responsible for their choices and actions. They cannot blame the serpent or anyone else for their sin. This reminds us of the importance of taking responsibility for our own decisions and facing the consequences that may arise from them. Third lesson: temptation and discernment. The serpent tempted Eve to disobey God, questioning the prohibition to eat from the forbidden fruit. This teaches us about the presence of temptation in our lives and the importance of exercising discernment and resisting temptation, seeking God's guidance in our choices. Fourth lesson: consequences of our actions. After disobeying, Adam and Eve faced consequences. They were expelled from the Garden of Eden and had to endure a life of hard work and difficulties. This part of the story reminds us that our actions have consequences, and we should be aware of the implications of our choices. Fifth lesson: forgiveness and redemption. Although they committed a grave sin, God did not completely abandon Adam and Eve. He provided them with clothes and showed his mercy. This part of the story highlights the potential for divine forgiveness and redemption, even when we make mistakes. It reminds us that even in the midst of the consequences of our actions, we can find hope and restoration. These are just some of the lessons that can be drawn from the story of Adam and Eve. It is important to remember that these biblical stories are rich in meaning and can be interpreted in various ways depending on each person's perspective.